George Floyd's family is urging lawmakers to pass a police reform bill named in his honor.
We're just thankful for what's going on, and we just want this George Floyd Policing Act to be passed in the future.
Floyd's brother and other members of his family were in Washington yesterday, marking 1 year since George Floyd's murder. They met with President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris at the White House. They also met with lawmakers and lead negotiators for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act on Capitol Hill. The bill passed the House in March, but it remains stalled in the Senate, missing the president's deadline to have the legislation passed by Tuesday as negotiations continue. So CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes is joining me now to talk more about this and other things happening up there at the White House. What more can you tell us about the meeting between President Biden and members of the Floyd family? I know it was behind closed doors, and also, where do negotiations stand on the bill?
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Well, the negotiations continue. Both sides still expressing optimism that they can get there, but there is still a lot of red tape to push through, agreements on every piece, every aspect of this legislation. They need to come to an agreement, and then they need to, sort of shop it around with the members that they work with to make sure that it is broadly acceptable. So while they are not obviously meeting the deadline, because it was yesterday set by the president, they do still think that in the coming weeks they are going to be able to put something on the table. As for the meeting yesterday, it lasted about an hour. It was closed to the press because the White House said that the president really wanted to have an opportunity to meet privately with the family, although the family did come out afterwards and talk to us and shared what a personal meeting it was, and that the president promised to keep fighting for police reform on their behalf, and they're doing a lot of fighting of their own. They were down on Capitol Hill multiple times yesterday meeting with key negotiators, and then stopped at Black Lives Matter Plaza, not far from the White House. So they are definitely going to be keeping up the drumbeat, as is the White House. And at this point, things are looking pretty positive, but it's not unusual to have major hitches at the last moment. So we're just going to have to watch this and see where it goes.
So in the meantime, Vice President Harris is meeting this afternoon with lawmakers from both parties to discuss the importance of investing in broadband infrastructure. Republicans are gearing up to present a counterproposal to the president's infrastructure package. What might be in their proposal, and what are they leaving out? Because I know sort of part of the negotiating is determining exactly what is infrastructure. And I don't know if they consider broadband expansion part of what should be in an infrastructure bill or not, but I know there were a lot of things that they felt just shouldn't be called infrastructure.
They do support broadband expansion, and the proposal that they are going to send back to the White House tomorrow is going to look on paper like it is a lot larger than their initial proposal. Their initial proposal was about $550 billion over 5 years. This proposal, we're told, is going to be about $1 trillion, but it's over 8 years. And so you're already hearing from Democrats who say, well, this is sleight of hand. They're just expanding the time frame. This is really very similar to what they put forward the first time. We'll have to see. We haven't gotten our eyes on the proposal yet. But Republicans are making the same accusations of the White House. The White House said, look, we came down by $500 billion ourselves last week in our counterproposal to Republicans. And Republicans say, no, but your bill is still filled with the kind of social infrastructure that you were just referring to, Anne-Marie, things like child care and job training, things that Republicans argue shouldn't be in the bill. So the bottom line is, even after we see this counterproposal from Republicans, the two sides are still going to be fairly far apart, nearly $1 trillion. And an interesting development on Capitol Hill is there's now a third group, a bipartisan group of senators that involves people like Mitt Romney of Utah, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who are having talks as well about their own infrastructure proposal. Now, they say they're kind of hanging back right now. They're not going to release something because they want to give the two parties that are negotiating right now time to work through some of their differences, but they're kind of waiting in the wings, and it could be that we end up seeing some kind of compromise third proposal come out from this bipartisan group that would then be on the table and up for debate as well.
Meantime, Republican leaders are condemning Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's sort of shocking that she's getting some criticism from her own party. It's because of comments that she made comparing masks and vaccines to the suffering of Jews during the Holocaust. I think it goes without saying that there's pretty much nothing that compares to the Holocaust, and people should stop doing that. Yet, it happens. There's been a petition now. 100,000 people have signed this petition to have the Georgia Congresswoman expelled from Congress. I would think it's a pretty high bar to have a Congresswoman who was voted in by her constituents removed from that position. So, how likely is this to happen? And I don't even know if this has ever happened before, but can you give us a little insight on this?
So I actually went back and looked, Anne-Marie, because I didn't recall anyone being expelled from Congress during the 12 years that I covered Congress. And it's true, the last time that a lawmaker was expelled from the House was in 2002. It was a Democrat from Ohio, Jim Traficant. In his case, he had just been charged with bribery, racketeering, and tax evasion. So a slightly different level there. And there is a whole process that you have to go through if you want to expel someone. It goes through the House Ethics Committee. Needless to say, both sides would have to be on board for that. So I think expulsion, particularly in the short term, is pretty unlikely, as you say. Censure is far more likely. And that is something that Democrats are now pushing for. They're introducing resolutions to censure Congresswoman Taylor Greene. But there's a bit of tit for tat going on here where Republicans, while they have come out and criticized pretty strongly the comments that she made, they're turning around saying, well, actually, we want to censure this group of progressive Democrats because they have been very critical of Israel, and these Republicans argue that that is anti-Semitic. And so, these are Democrats who have not criticized Jews. They have criticized Israel for what they called, an overreaction to Palestinian rockets. That is obviously a matter of heated debate. But nevertheless, while Republicans are coming out and criticizing Marjorie Taylor Greene, they're also looking to sort of pivot and say that it's progressive Democrats who should be censured and not Republicans.
Well, speaking of Israel, Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been in both Israel and Gaza over the past couple of days and announced that the U.S. is reopening the consulate in Jerusalem. Can you explain why this is so significant?
Yes, so he's in Israel, and he has been meeting with both Israeli and Palestinian leaders. And this is an announcement he made after meeting with the Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas. And the reason that this is significant is that this is a consulate that was closed by President Trump. And this is really the office that had been serving as the headquarters of U.S. diplomatic efforts to meet with and assist Palestinians. So the fact that Secretary of State Blinken now says that that office is going to be reopened, it has symbolic meaning. It also has practical meaning. It shows that the U.S. is going to be stepping up its diplomatic efforts and its public show of support for the Palestinian people. Blinken went a step further, announcing that the U.S. would be giving about $40 million in additional aid to Palestine. That brings the total to $360 million. So, this is a sign that while he is obviously meeting with and showing support for Israeli leaders, that the U.S. government is going to be really stepping up and showing a lot more support for the Palestinian people than the previous administration did.
Very interesting. Nancy Cordes, thank you.
You're welcome.